Hello everyone, welcome to the session on the Global AI Bootcamp 2022. My name is Liji Thomas and I'm here to present a session on how to build chatbots to drive workplace inclusion. Thank you for making time to attend this session of the Global AI Bootcamp Spain. A word of thanks to our sponsors, without whom we would not be able to do these kind of community events. So thank you very much. A little bit about myself. I'm a manager with Enterprise Technology, Valorum Reply. I'm also a Microsoft AI MVP. You can find me on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and my personal blog post as well. Here's a quick agenda for the day. We'll start with the precursor to conversational AI before we look into Microsoft's offering in this space and go into the meat of the presentation, which is the bot framework composer. We'll have lots of demos and finally open it up for Q&A. So a quick look at the history thus far. So the evolution of chatbots, as you can see, has happened over the past couple of decades. We started with the PC era, then we come to the internet era. We have websites, from the desktop applications to the websites, and then we have the mobile era where we have the smartphones and smart applications, and now we have the AI era, as it's now called, with chatbots and a lot of intelligent applications. But what exactly is a chatbot? So a chatbot is nothing but another computer program. What it does is it simulates the human conversations through text and voice responses. So it can either be a standalone application like Alexa or Siri, or you can even incorporate it with your existing application like your website. So what a bot does, or what all a bot can actually do, depends on your use case. So you can use a chatbot to answer very simple questions to even engaging in very complex and sophisticated conversations. You can use a chatbot to set up your alarm, to tell you what the weather is, or even set up your dentist appointment. So why do you use chatbots? The major factor being that the chatbots feel less like using a computer and more like dealing with a person. It's available 24/7, and there is an immediate response that is available from the chatbots. It is possible to reach new channels and a great user experience as well. But most importantly, when humans interact with computers, there is an equitable conversation where computers can speak with every single human and every human can speak with the computers. So a little bit on the history, chatbots have not happened just a couple of years back. It's been in existence for a lot of years, a couple of decades, in fact. And looking into the future, there are statistics that say that this conversational AI space is here to stay. Like 95% of customer interactions are expected to be powered by AI chatbots by 2025. And a lot of application areas than just customer service. So you see that the major brands have already adopted a chatbot or conversational AI strategy across multiple domains, small businesses, medium, on-prem, in cloud, so on and so forth. And very innovative use cases of chatbots as well. There are chatbots that provide legal services, even wine recommendations, and even chatbots that are based out of cognitive behavioral therapy research that helps with healing patients with clinical depression. So debunking a few chatbot myths here, the chatbots are not necessarily a new technology. It is relevant and it's developing, but not new. And it can be used for a variety of applications and not just customer service. All bots do not necessarily use AI or artificial intelligence. There are chatbots that are scripted or purely rule-based and cannot help more than those 2 or 3 commands that it feeds. And then there are AI-based chatbots. Chatbots are not in competition with humans. in a team of chatbots and humans, there is a powerful capability. And chatbots are not anymore very difficult to build. This is what the rest of the session is about. Microsoft has started on this realm a couple of years back. Prophetically, Satya said in one of the Build conferences that human language is the new UI layer and bots are like the new applications. If you look at the Azure AI platform, you'd see the Azure AI services, infrastructure, and the tools that are required to build intelligent applications today. In the infrastructure side, you see AI on data and AI compute. On the AI services side, you'd see pre-built AI, conversational AI, and custom AI. All this coupled with the developer community getting access to tools, coding and management tools and frameworks to get started is a powerful combination. So for the sake of this session, we will be looking at the conversational AI piece. Now, Microsoft's AI vision has been rooted in years and decades of research coming out of the Microsoft research centers. For the past 20, 30 years, Microsoft AI has been advancing to the point of obtaining human parity, which means that the algorithms are able to perform at a level as good as the humans are. So if I have to dive into the technical advancements or the technical options that are available today to build a bot, first step, there is the Bot Framework SDK. It's a fully in-code experience and primarily targeted to the developers. The SDK is open source and you get full access and full flexibility to build your bot ground up. And then we have the Power Virtual Agents. So Microsoft initially released the Bot Framework SDK, but then later on came up with the Power Virtual Agents, which is a low or no code tool primarily intended for business users. So it's got a very easy to use graphical user interface, and it's an online application using which you can build bots quite relatively very easily. But then later on, they released the Bot Framework Composer. This is a low-code tool that is intended to speed up the chatbot development. Given that you have different flavors or different options to build a bot, you'll probably be curious as to when to use what. So if you have a need to build very simple and easy chatbot use cases with literally no coding skills, perhaps Power Virtual Agent fits. If you need to visualize your dialogues and to design your conversational flows and later take it on to a coding environment, you might want to start with the Bot Framework Composer. The Bot Framework SDK will provide you full flexibility and control over the bot that you intend to build. This session will focus on the Bot Framework Composer as an option to build a chatbot. So what is the Bot Framework Composer? The Bot Framework Composer is a visual editing canvas for building bots. It's an open source IDE to create and manage conversational experiences. You can do a lot of things with the Bot Framework Composer, but before we dwell into that, let's talk about why should I use the Composer. It is possible, as I said, to build a chatbot ground up from the scratch using code, using a programming language of your choice, using a very powerful Bot Framework SDK. Then why should I use the Composer, or why should I start with it? It's much easier to design conversational experiences using this visual designer versus a code-first approach, and we'll see how. How do I get the Composer? It's as easy as downloading from the docs.microsoft.com. There is an option to download a Composer, both as a desktop application and also as a web-based component, depending on your preference. What can I do with the Composer? Short answer, you can create and you can manage bots. You can design conversational workflows. The long answer, a couple of things. You can add text and speech responses. You can embed it into web chat. You can integrate it with APIs of your choice. You can add Q&A or FAQ capabilities, add natural language understanding, and even publish your bot to Azure app service or app functions, Azure functions. So let's look at a quick demo on how to use the bot framework composer. So if you're fairly new to this, said it is a very easy installation from docs.microsoft.com, and I have installed the latest version of the bot framework composer as a desktop application. And this is the interface that you get to start with. You can start with creating a new bot. And as you see, you have a couple of options or the templates to actually choose from. So your preferences can be between C# or between Node, and depending on that, you would need to install the SDK for it. I installed the .NET Core SDK, and I will be able to create a C# bot. So the reason it is set as C# and Node is, as much as the graphical user interface is going to seem very simple and seamless, behind the screen, it is actually creating code for you. So the experience can move on from the bot framework composer to a full-fledged IDE. So if you're non-technical folks or your designers or even your developers want to start with the bot framework composer, want to build those conversational experiences, those dialogues, those flows, but at a certain point in the future want to continue their development in Visual Studio or in an IDE of your choice, you may be able to do that. And when you open that up, you will be able to see code that is basically C# or code that's basically Node. So that decision is what we're taking here. So I'd like to go ahead and create a bot in C#, and I see that I have a number of options here. Depending on the template that I choose, I get these features out of the box. So I can start with an empty bot, which is literally doing nothing. And then you have far more advanced templates. Let's start with an empty bot. Let's name our bot. And this would be probably my first bot. So that will be my Hello World bot. And I will create that. So meanwhile, as I create the bot, I'd also like to introduce you to another tool, which is called the test emulator. The emulator is a standalone tool that you can download and you can test your conversational experiences in. Typically, a person who works with the bot framework SDK would need to set up the emulator. It is also possible to test the bot that you're creating in the bot framework composer using this emulator, but you don't have to, because in the bot framework composer, as you will see now, you also get a web chat to test your bot right then and there. So you have your environment to design, to test, even publish your bots right within the bot framework composer. Another thing is, you may get started on the Azure subscription. So if you do not have an Azure subscription today, you can go ahead and sign up and you get about $200 of free credit for your free subscription, and then you can pay as you go. And you can create Azure services in there and publish your bot to Azure. So before we get started, now a Hello World bot has been created for us. Let me go ahead and just run the bot. So I have not written or changed anything in the bot thus far. I'm just going to run the bot as is available today. And I'm going to allow access. And as you can see, you have two options to test your bot, to interact with your bot. You can either open it in a web chat or you can test in emulator. So I will open it in web chat and it says, welcome to your bot. That was something that I get out of the box. Now, interestingly, if I tell it anything at this point of time, it will say, sorry, I didn't get that. Let's see how this works. If you go to the left-hand side, you see that this visual interface has got a number of elements. The easiest way to acclimatize with this is if you go to the settings pane, you get a lot of options here, but I encourage you to try out the onboarding experience, which is a great way to self-teach. And if I go back to my design view, you see that there is a self-teach section here. And it will show you or introduce you to each and every section of the composer. So right now it's saying that there is a main dialogue. So a dialogue is the fundamental component of a bot interaction. you can compare that to a literal dialogue between you and me. So every time we have a conversation, there's a dialogue that makes up, there are multiple dialogues that make up that conversation. And in a bot, there is one main dialogue and several child dialogues if you require it. So they have already created the main dialogue for us. The next concept is that of a trigger. So within a dialogue, there are components called triggers. So imagine when I tell a bot, like I tried right now, the word hello or hi or hey, it did not quite understand that. But that is a trigger, and that's sending an event to the bot saying that, hey, this is my question and I want you to respond to that. So I can add new triggers as part of my dialogues. And then what you do in response to that trigger is what's called actions. So actions are a component of the trigger, which will be what your bot does in response to every user input or to that trigger. So these are the three major components or three major concepts here: dialogues, triggers, and actions. The next thing is about the user inputs. So typically, when you interact with a bot, there are two major components, at least off the bat, what you see from the outside. There's a user input that goes into a bot, and there's a bot response that comes out. User inputs can be configured here, and bot responses can be configured using this pane. And as we already said, we can test using a web chat or an emulator. And then finally, when you're ready, you can go ahead and configure and publish the bot. And you can go back to that onboarding menu whenever. So let's get started here. So in our Hello World bot, as you can see, this is what I get out of the box. It might look a little overwhelming, but it's rather simple. And interestingly, I like this new feature that's added very recently. And it shows you, it talks you through the various elements, like what this loop does for each member that's added to the conversation. It is trying to provide a greeting message which is not repetitive. So these are the kind of workflows that you can create, and it's rather simple. If you look through this, you will identify where the welcome message came, and this is the welcome message that we received when we started the bot. Welcome to your bot. Now, this is interesting because I can go ahead and I can change this as I like. I can add any message that I'd like, and it's as simple as that. That's how easily I can change. Now, I'd also like to maybe, as I said, when I greeted it using hey or hi, it didn't quite understand what I said. How about we ask it a couple of questions as well? So it says welcome, and I'd like to ask the bot. So here's where you add these various triggers. You can just send a response. You can ask a question. You can create a condition loop. Add additional dialogues, sub-dialogues, etc. Let's ask a question to the bot. I'd like to ask the bot, my name is Hello Bot. What's your name? Let's try that. And as you can see, this is the prompt, the question that's going to go out to the user, and this is the user response that's going to come in. Now, the user response, as you do it programmatically, can be actually stored in a variable. So that would be user.input. Let's say our user.name, and I like to store it there. And once I get the user's response, assuming that the user is going to respond to that, I'd like to send a response to the user, greeting the user, say, hello, the name of the user, whatever the user has just provided. So it's, as you can see, it's fairly simple. I don't even have to memorize all that code that's required there. And I can say, nice to meet you. So that's probably going to help me, interact with the users a bit. So you can kind of see how I created my own little workflow over here by just clicking on the plus and adding the relevant options there. You might also have noted that the first time we tried the hey or the hi, it did not quite respond, but it did say that I didn't get it. So there is an unknown intent or an unknown trigger over there, which says that if the bot is asked or said anything that the bot is not programmed to do or is not aware of as of now, just yet, it is asked to send a response, sorry, I didn't get that. Even this can be completely customized. Try rephrasing your query. Okay, and what I would do is I would just restart my bot and just see if those changes have been reflected. And then I would open it in web chat and I'd do that again. What's your name? So if I say hello, it says, hello, Oli G, nice to meet you. And usually in the bot, I'd like to interact with the bot. Most of the bots, it's a good best practice of the bot that you configure the bot with a help command. A user who's interacting with your bot may not necessarily know all the capabilities of your bot, so it's always good to configure your bot with a help command. But unfortunately, at this point, you see that there's a change in the sorry text there. But my bot has not been configured with the help command. So I can go in here and I can add a new help command. So I would add a new trigger. And before I do that, I do want to change the language understanding type here. And I get to that in a minute. But just know that there are various ways in which your bot can understand or recognize the user's language. So there's a language understanding service by means of which you can do that, which is a very powerful service. We'll get to that in a minute. But for now, I would just give a regular expression. So that's just plain language with which I can communicate. So let me go back here and add a new trigger, and I'd select intent recognized. And let's say the name of my trigger is hello trigger. So I would like my bot to keep an eye out for these kinds of commands. So a user could say help, or the user could say something as simple as I'm lost, or even ask the bot, what do you do? Or what can you do? Just plain English terms. And if you note, I have actually separated these various utterances that the user can provide to the bot by use of these pipeline symbols. And that's just how you provide that regex pattern. At any point, if you'd like to change that, you can always come back here and add or edit or delete additional trigger phrases. Now, the story here is that when the user asks the bot or says to the bot, help, I'm lost, what can you do, or something of that sort, I'd like my bot to respond to the user and say that hello bot, just introduce yourself and say, at this point, I can greet users. I don't know if that's super helpful, but that's what my bot does. Let's restart our bot and see how it responds. So I'm expecting my bot to be able to respond to a term like hello or likewise. So I'm going to restart my conversation, get a clean slate. And it says, my name is hello bot, what's your name? And I say, okay, help. And it says, okay, so that's interesting. So it keeps asking me for that. Now, the ability to interrupt a conversation is a huge plus from a conversational user experience perspective. So, and it's quite simple to do things like that in a bot framework composer. For example, if I have to go back here, now this is my dialog flow. I would click here, and if you note, on the right pane, I have a couple of options: bot response, user input, other. I would click other and go down, right down into prompt configurations. There is an option here to allow interruptions, which is by default false. I would change that to true. Now that's all I ever did. So let's see how that works. Now all of this is absolutely possible in code. It's just going to take a little more time and effort to be able to do that. And in the bot framework composer, it's far easier. So it says, my name is bot, and I don't want to respond with my name. I really want it to tell me bot, help. So it says, I'm hello bot, I can greet users, which was our response for help. And then it goes back to its previous conversation. So it is possible to interrupt a conversation and provide that kind of experience. So this is at a very high level of the various things that you can do with a bot in terms of dialogues, triggers, actions, etc. And we're really scratching the surface in terms of the capabilities of the bot framework composer. But then Let's go back and let's take a look at the remaining presentation as well. So as we just saw, we created a chatbot using the bot framework composer in little to no time. Probably not a super helpful or super useful bot, but there are additional capabilities that we can infuse into the bot to make it very powerful. The bot, as you'd recognize by now, is just the face of your AI or your artificial intelligence. So where exactly is all of the brain work happening? When a user interacts with the bot, all that the user knows is that the user is asking a question and it's getting a response. But there's literally lots of stuff that's happening behind the scenes to enable that conversation. So from a bot's perspective, there are two things primarily. One, the bot should be able to understand what the user is asking, and two, be able to respond to that. Now, the understanding of the user's ask is not a trivial concept because it is as powerful as being able to understand human language. And there are a lot of services today that will enable us in that aspect. The one that we tried out was a regular expression or regex expression, but we can use powerful services like LUIS, Language Understanding Services. It's a pre-built service that is available from Microsoft, using which you can understand the user's intent. And once you do, you can store your set of questions and answers in a repository called Q&A Maker, which is also a service available from Microsoft. So the bot knows what to respond to when the user asks a set of questions. In fact, there's a whole list of services that are available at your disposal today in case you want to make use of pre-built AI services, which is a whole session in itself. But if you're interested, do try out Azure Cognitive Services. A couple of these have got very seamless integration with the bot framework composer. And it's interesting to see how the bot will respond to your users in very powerful ways. So when your bot is able to interact with these services, it just makes your conversational experiences far more intelligent for the user. So we will see how the bot framework composer can integrate with one or two of these in a bit, and also know that you can also integrate it with external systems. Like if you want to bring in your own APIs, your custom APIs to integrate with the composer, even that is possible. But there are today out of the box so many cognitive services that you do not really have to reinvent the wheel around infusing artificial intelligence, and you can just focus on the business domain and driving that. So if you need to do a proofread, you can use the Bing spell check API, you can use speech APIs, translation APIs, analytics APIs in case you're interested in analyzing the sentiments of the user responses, so on and so forth. So we will look at a demo, and this is the interesting bit where I go into building a far more meaningful bot than just the Hello World bot. It's the Inclusive Language Assistant, or what I call ELA. Before I dive back into the demo mode, I'd like to talk a bit about inclusive language itself. So it is an area that is slowly capturing a lot of interest and driving a lot of attention, but it's good to talk about it a bit. In our communities, especially in our technical communities, as we build out technical pieces, it's important that we understand the importance of inclusive language and making people, not just whom we work with, but whom we create these products and services for, also a part of the community. So they must feel welcome and included. But going back to just our teams, the way we communicate on a daily basis, even within our technical spheres itself, there's a lot of movement around using inclusive language and inclusive communication. And this spans across Microsoft, Google, Apple, and a lot of these industry leaders who are taking a bold step forward in this regard. And one organization that I found quite interesting was called the Inclusive Naming Initiative. And this is a cross-organizational effort with multiple companies coming together. And it's an initiative that, if you're interested, your entity or your company can even join today, I guess. So you can be a part of that initiative and take recommendations from this initiative that is looking to build more inclusive language usability in our technical communities. So I can quickly just show you what that site looks like. So if you are interested, you can go to inclusivenaming.org and you can check out the site, as I said. And it's interesting because a lot of words that we typically use in our daily basis, we don't think twice about using that because we're just so preconditioned with using that in a technical sphere. But if you want to quickly look at it, you can look at, there's a section called word list, and there's an overview. There are multiple tiers that are to be considered here. And if you look at the tier 1, which they recommend are words that we need to replace as of now, like immediately, there are so many words like abort and whitelist or blacklist, master, slave, and things like that. And you can really take your time to read through this and try and understand what those replacement terms look like, what is the context that this is being used in, and why they're actually recommending a replacement in that particular aspect. And there are various levels at which, so some they recommend to replace immediately, some are strong recommendations, and some are good to have. So imagine if we could build a bot in which, just like you would check your syntax, semantics, like you're using Grammarly, right? It's important to also check if your language, if your piece of text is inclusive in nature. And if this bot was able to proactively identify in a piece of text that this text does not seem to be inclusive for so and so reason, it gives us an opportunity to self-correct and also to learn and better interact in the communities, right? So that's the idea from which I go back into the bot framework composer. And I just go back to my presentation there a bit and see if that is, yeah. So I'll go back to my bot framework composer. And so here's, where we had stopped last time. So if I have to, build on the conversation that we just talked about right now, and I have to add an intent, right? Say, imagine I'm going to add a trigger here, and I'm going to say that anytime, so let's call this trigger a bot trigger, and which is also not the right term. So I'll say AB trigger and say anytime a user uses the word abort, and it's going to keep an eye out for that, and it's going to send out a response saying consider replacing abort with we can fill that up. So so this is at a very basic level, based on what we've learned so far, what we can do with the bot. Now, we'd have to do this or create multiple triggers for every other term that we'd like to consider. So at this point, if I say, and if you remember, the phrase that we trained it with was just abort, but I can use very elaborate phrases that contain just the word abort. So a typical phrase that we might use in our technical communities is, let's abort the process. It's been running for a very long time. So you see that the language understanding bit of it has actually captured the word abort in that entire piece of text. And it sends back a response saying, consider replacing abort with da. So you get the idea, and you can kind of scale this by adding multiple triggers for every other word that you're considering for replacement or reconsideration, and you can customize your responses accordingly. That is a possibility, but an easier way of doing it and a more efficient way, I thought, was to create a knowledge repository where you have these list of words and you also have a very customized set of responses that my bot can tap into. And that would probably be a standalone interface, and I don't have to, create triggers for every other word that I'm considering. So it is possible to do that. And for that, we're going to use the services of a service called Q&A Maker, which is a question and answer Maker. So how we would do that is we would go to Azure. If you have an Azure portal, you can create a Q&A Maker service here in the portal, and you can go and create you can just type Q&A, you have a Q&A Maker, and you go ahead, click create, and you can add multiple, you can provide the configuration capabilities, add the name of the maker, etc., choose your subscription, your resource group, location, etc., and that's ready. So your Q&A Maker service is actually ready. And then you would go to a portal that's called qamaker.ai. And I have created a knowledge base that I want to show you up front. And in my knowledge base, I do have a couple of commands. And as you can see, I've added a question answer. So it's fairly simple. You can add any set of questions and you can set an answer over here. And this is a very rich text editor where you can add images and format it accordingly. So the Q&A Maker itself is a very powerful cognitive service that you can hook into. So coming back to our bot framework composer, as you can see, you can very easily connect to that Q&A Maker, and let's see how. So some of these options on the left-hand side, you'd see that there is an option for knowledge base. And I can, as I say, right now I don't have a knowledge base, but I can create a new knowledge base. I can add the name of my knowledge base. So I can say ELAs, KB, and then I can go and I can actually connect with my knowledge base, and I can bring in that knowledge base. So you can even build the knowledge base right inside the bot framework composer and can sync it accordingly. Now, for the sake of time, I have actually started a bit on that, so I can show you a little bit on that. So here's the knowledge base that is connected to the Q&A Maker that I just showed you right now. And as you can see, it's brought in all the configurations that I have in the Q&A Maker. Let me just run this for you and let me show you what we have out of the box. So I have my regular stuff, and I also have my Q&A intent recognized. So this was all pre-built and just pre-created for me. Likewise, it is possible to configure or to integrate with other cognitive services like the language understanding service. So if you want to identify or understand the intent of your bot, even that is possible, and other cognitive services as well. So let's start. Same example as before. Say that's about the process. And if you see right now, I get a very detailed and comprehensive answer from the user, from the bot, sorry. So it explains what the context of a bot is, but INI, which is Inclusive Naming Initiative, recommends that it be replaced for so and so reason. These are the recommended terms and these are the other replacement terms. And this has been, this response comes because I have created that response for that question in my Q&A Maker. And likewise, you can, and if you look at the the answer, it's been formatted in a way that it's easily comprehensible by the user. So likewise, let's try another example. So another thing that I think we use in our daily language, can you whitelist that IP? I don't know how many of you have heard that, but again, it will explain, this is the definition, this is the proposed alternative, and the reasoning for that as well, and what their recommendation is. You can use, talk about master branch or whatnot. So there are so many options and so many recommendations that it provides for each and every word. And this does not have to be just the word itself, though, because the language understanding component is there to a certain extent. You can include this word as part of a whole text, and it will still be able to recognize that word and will be able to provide those responses. And each of these responses, as I said, has actually gone into the Q&A Maker itself. So these are questions and answers that I've actually programmed it or have actually sat down and manually added. But it is also possible to link it to an existing URL. For example, to say, if you go back to that site, Inclusive Naming Initiative, you might recognize that, like most sites, it has a beautiful FAQ page. And it has a couple of questions inside this. Now, I do not want to manually add each and every one of these questions. So what I would do is I would just copy that FAQ URL, go back here, and I can add a Q&A. So let's say this is ELA's, that's Inclusive Language Assistant FAQ page. And you see that there is an option to even provide a source URL. And if I say a source URL, now that's going to take a minute or so. Internally, what's happening is that it has the capability to parse through those FAQs that you saw on the site, and it will create question answer pairs for you automatically. And that is the magic. So let's restart our bot. So it takes all these latest changes are reflected, and let's see how this sort of works. So you see that there are a couple of questions around, what is inclusive naming, and why is this important, and what terms are you recommending, and things like that. So in case your users or the audience is interested about the concept of inclusive naming or the language itself, it is possible to do that. So let's, so what I was saying, what is inclusive naming? And it will return an answer for that. And so why should I care? Like, why would I care about that? I didn't quite get that. So what I would do is I would go back here, and I do see a similar question. Why is this important? I can add an alternative phrase there asking, why should I care about inclusive naming? So you get the idea of how you can actually build on this, and you can create very powerful experiences by just using the tools that are available for us today. And you can build on this. You can add your additional questions manually. You can even point to existing URLs if you find other sites that have got such similar guidance, and you can build on that. So that's in a nutshell, the kind of experiences that we can build. Let's try this last time. And okay, I will go right to my question itself. Why should I care? And it says, if software is truly meant to be inclusive, then everyone needs to have an opportunity to participate, which is, I think, a very fair ask. So next steps, again, if you're interested, these are things that we can actually keep track of. Imagine we had an integration with our CI/CD pipelines or our source code, our documentation that we create, the variable names that you use in it. So beyond even a chatbot, you can even think about things where you can actually integrate this, maybe in your team's chat environment. So if you have a bot as part of your daily conversations in your teams, that bot could keep a track of the messages or the kind of conversations that you're having, and could immediately provide a recommendation on how better to rephrase that from an inclusion perspective. So there is so many things that we can take this as next steps. So quickly coming to wind this down, let's say one of the question I get typically asked with a lot going on, especially from a technical capability, what is our number one priority when designing a bot? I think, especially when it comes to designing a chatbot, it's about the conversational user experience. I mean, there's so much that we can add, and we can focus on the functional aspects and on how better to serve our customers, but it's also about the conversational experience. And that's where a tool like Bot Framework Composer is indispensable. You can design your workflows to ensure that there is minimal back and forth, and you directly address the customer's problem or the user's, whatever your user cares about. It's very easy for the user to get to the core of the problem, and the bot to guide the user. So your conversational user experience is a huge priority when it comes to designing your bot. So that is all I have for now. As we looked at the history of conversational AI, Microsoft's offering in this space, Bot Framework Composer, a lot of demos, and I am happy to take your questions. If you have any for me, please leave it in the chat window, and I'm happy to take your questions, or feel free to connect with me even after this, LinkedIn or Twitter, and we can talk. But a quick word of thanks once again to our sponsors who has helped us immensely to put up a huge conference like this, especially in difficult times as this, bringing in the technical community together and helping us with this. So thank you so much to all our sponsors and to our audience for tuning in today to Global AI 2022 Spain. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.